order. I'd like to welcome Brent Leary. Welcome, Brent.
I'm glad I'm descendant, I guess.
Well, you cocked your head a little bit, like what? So you won the lottery.
Oh.
Also from the Pacific Northwest is Michael Markman.
What do you do? Greetings from the Pacific Northwest.
Joining from a city that I don't recognize is Frank Radice.
Hi, mate. That's all you get.
Yeah.
It's resplendent order.
And from the Atlantic Northeast is Denis Pombriant.
That would be me.
And manning the battleship, of course, is our producer director Tina Chase Gillmor, who's there.
Did you introduce Keith?
Oh yeah, Keith Teare.
You know, as soon as he said descending order, I knew exactly what was going to happen.
You didn't give that away, or you would have been first.
I was trying to think of what the joke could be when you finally got to
There is no joke. That's the joke. There's nothing funny about the situation that we're in. I think somebody that Tina's been following on Facebook decided to give up on any more virus humor. I think he ran out of jokes. I thought he ran out of them at the beginning. Okay, so anybody have a clue? I'm just desperately trying to stay positive.
Oh, good luck.
Well, the Swedish epidemiologist who's in charge of Sweden's strategy during COVID-19 is kind of an optimist in a lot of ways. He's really interesting. There's a British YouTube channel called Lockdown TV that interviewed him, which you can find. And you probably all are aware, Sweden is the one country that's gone for what you could think of as a light touch lockdown, social distancing, but not forced to stay at home unless you're in a vulnerable group, which is older people and people with pre-existings. And he did this half-hour-long interview where he ridiculed the lockdown strategy. And it's the first time I heard somebody that I thought was sensible, logical, rational, scientific, make the case for his point of view, which was everybody is going to get this. 50% of us have already had it, but don't know. And none of us will die unless we're in a vulnerable group, unless you're very unlucky. Therefore, let's protect vulnerable groups, but let's not close down society, and we can deal with this. It was kind of a humanistic, this virus can't beat us kind of outlook. So it was very different to the street protests that say, liberate such and such a state that Trump's doing. It was a rational, scientific version of the same thing. I'm not saying I agree with it, but it was kind of refreshing to hear a different framework that wasn't completely crazy.
Well, that's nice, but it sounds like it's almost completely devoid of fact. You can't start by assuming you've got 50% coverage already and that we're not going to die from it. That's a lot of supposition.
Yeah, but we have to assume that only because testing is not available.
Have to. People who play Russian roulette assume there's no bullet in the chamber.
No, the guy is a scientist, so it isn't totally devoid of fact. And Sweden's numbers are real.
Well, yeah, but did Sweden do what he suggested? Is that how they did it?
Yeah, he's in charge of it.
Well, it sounds like they did what Trump wanted him to do, but without a gun.
Well, you've got a big issue here with just drawing the line. Where is the line between it's safe for me to get it, or I could end up with serious pneumonia and die. I mean, we know that if you're in your 20s, you're pretty safe, and maybe you've already had it and you've got an antibody, and we just don't know. We know that if you're in a nursing home, you're not safe, and you have to avoid the virus at all costs. But where's that middle ground? And as it turns out, the middle ground isn't strictly age related. It's pre-existing illnesses. It's a lot of things, and whether if you take that position, then you might not be screening for COVID-19 or coronavirus because you don't have the testing, but you're still going to have to get kind of a rigorous analysis by a doctor of your health before before anybody says, yeah, go play Russian roulette.
And how about their testing scheme, Keith? What do you know about that?
It's pretty much a second thought for them, because he assumes that most healthy people are going to get it, and he wants them to. Actually, he wants most healthy people to get it. So he's played the whole strategy to protect people who might die. So the Swedish death rate is no worse than anyone else's. In fact, it's a bit better.
Well, that's not true, actually. The other Scandinavian countries, they have about double the rate.
Sweden doesn't.
No, Sweden has about double the rate of what are the other two countries? Denmark, double Denmark.
And sometimes Finland.
I'm not trying to be an advocate either way. I'm just, speaking as a member of the vulnerable group because of age, I don't hear any strategy that actually speaks to that coming from Sweden. Do you, Keith?
Well, look, it made sense to me. Look, I'll tell you some quotes from him. This is no worse than the flu, except it's more contagious. It won't kill more people than the flu, but it is more contagious. We haven't got a virus, so you have to get immune to it. People who get it won't die unless they're in a vulnerable group. Therefore, A plus B plus C, blah, blah. It isn't irrational. It just isn't. I mean, it's the opposite of fear. That's true. And you could argue that it's a flagrant disregard for life, but he covered himself on that by having very stringent lockdowns for vulnerable groups. So, by the way, he's in his 60s, 70s even, and thoughtful, PhD, been an epidemiologist forever. It's not some kind of crazy guy.
Michael Markman.
It makes logical sense. I don't know how it can apply in a country where where the whole issue has become so politicized and divisive. It's hard to find rational solutions at this point.
Brent, Leary, you're in a semi-rational state, Georgia, correct?
Oh yeah, we're all the way rational here. We're getting ready to open back up on Friday.
He said semi.
Yeah, we're going full bore rational here. Our governor, one of the
rational AF.
America, he says we're ready to open up on Friday, and we're going to open up. We're going to social distance, but we're going to open up, and we're going to open up first gyms. We're going to open up our gyms first. So want to get your sweat on? Smart. We're going gyms first. We're going tattoo parlors. Got to get those hot needles, stick those arms and other body parts. We're going to get that going. We're also going to open up our restaurants. We're going to be eating in our restaurants after we work out in our gyms and get our nails done and our hair did.
You could have had Stacey Abrams.
We should have had. We probably did have Stacey Abrams, but the guy who was running the election, he was also running for governor. Guess who won?
A coinkydink, I'm sure.
We even know that over here.
Okay, over there, how's that going?
Oh, it's going all right. I mean, we have the National Health Service. Thank you very much. But that's but that's not why I'm here tonight, though. I honestly, I find this very interesting, and it makes me wonder why he who shall not be named hasn't picked up on this yet and used it as an excuse. I imagine that we could probably have some kind of a little game with this, a drinking game or something, as to when this is going to happen, when Trump's going to start
let's
talking
have a
about
drinking game for when you're going to say what you were trying to say.
I have a completely different thing I want to talk about. So when this has been exhausted, I'll bring it up. You want me to bring it up now?
Well, we may lose Dennis, but yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay with me.
I just, look, I wrote it. Yeah, Dennis, you didn't do anything, man. You're cool.
Is it about TV?
It's about TV, but it's about.
I have one.
It's about journalism. I actually think that broadcasting the afternoon, the evening, whatever time it is over there, briefings by the president, that's technology. That's not journalism. And I just am totally against the live broadcasting of these things. And I say that from a guy who's a technologist and a journalist. And I'm just flabbergasted that more people don't in the New York Times. I guess it was about a week ago about this. I totally agree with it. And, to me, I think that's really critical. I think that there's just too much misinformation getting out there. I think, for example, Keith, if Trump were to talk about what was going on in regards to what you were talking about, it would come out in a misinformed way, because it's so easy to take what you've said and what that doctor said about that country and make it sound plausible. You did it, but it would be misinformed, and it wouldn't be something that would happen in American society or even in British society right now.
The key to the Swedish approach is protecting the vulnerable, and that's never been part of the conversation in coming from the White House. The White House is it's binary, open or closed. It's not trying to draw boundaries around people who are most susceptible to dying.
Well, do you believe that it's actually that he is at foremost trying to protect anybody?
Yes, his own reelection is what he's trying to protect.
Yeah.
I recently switched in my head. I used to be an advocate of what you're saying. Don't broadcast them. Lately, I'm thinking, the more he talks, the lower his approval rating goes. The thing about Trump is that everyone's attitude toward him is locked. You're either in the cult or you're not in the cult. And his presence does nothing but annoy people who will vote against him in November. So I say, put him on as often as you can.
Well, but the other part of this for me is, there's three different kinds of ways to advertise, and it's earned media, it's paid media, and it's owned media. He ended up with such an outrageous amount of earned media prior to 2016 that I believe that journalists didn't learn their lesson from that. And I think if they had this, we wouldn't be in this situation in regards to having a conversation about whether or not there should be a live broadcast of these events or not. I've actually been arguing with an awful lot of people about this, and it really, to me, it boils down to really something simple. To me, journalism is the ability of a journalist, to witness an event and then cull it into the things that event means, put it into context, and then report it. And just by putting a camera up and shooting it is not journalism. That's kind of my point.
But
yes, I don't think is it journalists who are making the decision to air it, or is it someone in management who's not a journalist? Because on Twitter, I see many journalists from networks that carry the briefings say, don't carry these briefings live. Now, I don't know why they're telling Twitter that and not telling their management that. Journalists are making the decision to put them on the air.
Well,
wait a
minute. I have a point. I see what you're saying, but I happen to know that the three guys who run the three networks are journalists. They actually, though, happen to have a problem. And the problem is that they run the networks. So they have to be business oriented. So clearly put it on what's good for, this is what Les Moonves said. He certainly wasn't a journalist, but it's not good for the country, but it's good for CBS. There is a conundrum that these guys have to deal with. But Andy Lack and the woman that runs CBS News, the person that runs ABC News, these guys and gals are journalists, but they're stuck in the middle of this as now being business people. So
They've been promoted out of journalism to management.
Exactly.
My observation, it might be informed by the fact that I'm not American born, but the whole dynamic between the federal level and the state level is so weird to me. It's like the idea that the United States is a nation doesn't really exist, because every state has control over so many elements in a situation like this. Now, partly because of Trump, you don't want federal authority because he'd blow it. On the other hand, you're crying out for it because you can see that 50 different strategies doesn't make any sense. And so I kind of puzzle with the resolution of the Civil War that led to the federal system, where for some things Congress matters and the presidency matters, but for things like this it really doesn't. It's kind of weird to me.
Well, I think the dynamic of what's been going on between the White House and the states has been so muddled anyway in the last few weeks that he's taking federalism and he's turning it into states' rights, and then he takes states' rights and it becomes the federal government's right. I mean, that is so confused right now. I'm not even sure, as an American who lives in England, I'm not even sure what to say about that. I think it's interesting, by the way that the news conference is held here in the UK, Keith. I'm sure you've seen it, where where there are three leaders and all of the questioning is coming electronically from reporters in the field or in their offices or in their homes. And there's no one in the room, so there's no ability for, and I actually think the Brits are way more sophisticated than Donald Trump, because there's no way that they're going to be yelling at reporters in a room because there are no reporters in the room. That actually that works. It's odd how I'm sitting here saying that's okay, do that one live, but don't do Trump live, and maybe it's because I have a point of view.
Denis, any thoughts?
Well, it's not simply whether or not to do Trump live or do the other guys live. Trump has not only not earned the right to be live, but he's disproved his claim on being live by showing propaganda and treating these events as campaign events. Rallies, yeah. So I think you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. I think what they're doing over in the UK sounds pretty good to me. I think it's a pretty reasonable approach. Like everything that Trump touches, he corrupts it. He's corrupted the entire presidency. All of the norms and values that weren't written down into do this, don't do that kinds of laws. He's run roughshod right over. So why should the press conference be any different? And why should we cover that?
He's also run roughshod over many things that are written down, in addition.
Precisely.
Brent, you agree with what?
I just miss the local news. It used to be at 6 o'clock. You could turn on any local news station and get news on what's going on in your local area. Now it's a press conference / substitute for a campaign rally. I mean, he's playing video clips. I'm waiting for him to start the chant. Lock her up chant with all the guys in the press. Looking at themselves saying "lock her up." because this is all it is. I mean, somebody said propaganda. I mean, there's no real news being made in these things. He comes on, says whatever he wants, and then by the time the local news is supposed to be, at least you get a little of it, you don't get any of it, and then you're stuck rehashing what he said for the next 3 hours on various cable TV shows.
Yeah,
So
well,
yeah.
the thing that I stopped watching is the rehash.
Yeah, why do you need the rehash?
Yeah.
Because it's almost like, I mean, we're stuck in our houses anyway, doing our shelter in place thing. So every day feels the same. And part of every day feeling the same is seeing him on the TV from 6 to 8 or whatever it is. Basically, it's almost like every day for him is, remember that old Seinfeld episode, Festivus?
Mm-hmm.
Part of Festivus was the airing of the grievances. It's like Festivus every day when that thing comes on, because there's going to be airing of grieving, whatever the governor said during the course of the day. It's like he waits until the end of the day so that he can make sure he got all of the all the things that people said about him, so he can then go on for 2 hours on national networks and air the grievances.
I think you make a really good point about local news, though. I think from what I've read and the research I've seen, that there's a large percentage of American population gets its news primarily from local television newscasts. And so part of the philosophy and the strategy is to block out those local newscasts and to keep them from coming on. Now, I think it's interesting that there's I think the Congress is very close to voting in some additional monies to be given to the local news stations around the country to help support them during what's going on now. But I find that kind of odd if there's not any local news to see at that prime time hour. There's whatever you think, there's some media strategy, some serious media strategy behind doing this, and behind knowing that the business people who used to be journalists are going to cover it live.
I watch Morning Joe every morning on MSNBC, and it's kind of the same but the opposite. The first 15 minutes every morning is a rehash of the history of Trump's failings in great detail. And then it's a rant. And even though I agree with everything I hear, I can't watch it anymore because it's kind of, I'm done with that.
It's like the same thing every day.
Steve was saying, we were having a conversation this week. I'm sorry, I'm going to give away this, Steve. But both Steve and I don't know, I was a real MSNBC fan. And I'm starting to feel exactly the way you feel, Keith. And I've switched back to watching CNN, which seems to be less as manic anti-Trump as MSNBC is. I'm not watching it because it's less anti-Trump. I'm watching it because it's not as manic.
I'm watching more CNN because you might get one of those Cuomo on Cuomo interview videos, and I kind of like those. They kind of break up the constant monotony of bashing and all of that stuff. So,
all right.
Well, it's the Maryland governor has been doing some pretty good stuff. And every time I hear an interview with this guy, he's a Republican. He's well spoken. He's doing some great things for the state, and he manages to get his point out about his concern over what the White House is doing and their lack of helping him. And look, the guy bought 500,000 test kits from South Korea with the help of his South Korean wife. And got nothing but a boatload of grief from the president in one of those live news conferences. But he held back and didn't attack the president, which I thought was pretty civilized. Anyway,
yeah,
sorry, Steve.
Larry Hogan, right? That's his name.
Yeah.
So I think there's a common thread here, which is that we're moving from how the media responded to the immediate crisis, which used to be Trump and now is the virus, and now we're in a phase where we should probably start emulating the strategies of the doctors. What are they doing to be able to move the ball forward? And the other way of framing this, I would suggest, is imagine what it's going to be like, not the next normal or, some sort of return to all the things that we used to know and love, but rather what's the normal going to be for this period of experimentation, of political, arguments, etc. What is going to look and feel more positive than negative in this time frame? Anybody have any ideas about that?
Well, the most positive is the general population's preparedness to act together to an end goal. I mean, that, I would say almost ever since the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War protests, there's never been a time in recent history when very, very large numbers of people did something together for the common good.
And being together is actually being apart.
Yeah, but people really, I mean, there's a fear element, but not that much. I think it's, the whole thing about the mask is to protect others from you, is symbolic of that. I started wearing a mask early on. I didn't wear a mask because I felt stupid. As soon as that message landed, I started wearing a mask when I go to the store. And so I think that human desire to do good is not dead.
Yeah, but I would
no.
say most of the folks that I see, wearing the mask, I don't think they're looking at it like that. I think they're thinking, I'm protecting myself. Although
Right.
all the doctors say it's really to protect folks from you, I don't get that from the folks wearing the masks. I think they're looking at it as, look, I don't want your cooties, and I'm going to protect myself from it. So maybe we let them think that, because then they'll still wear the stuff and it works for us in general. But I don't think there's that altruistic, I'm wearing the mask so I will protect everybody from me.
I think that some of the
I-
people wearing the masks and carrying the guns are wearing the masks for an entirely different reason.
Yeah.
Dennis?
I was going to say that it's premature to say this, but you might look back on this 10 years from now and say this is when the oil industry was broken. If you think about it, we're not using what we typically use. We've got no more storage space for it. The oil markets have cratered in the last couple of days. Oil actually went negative. People may, from this, do a couple of things. Discover that they don't have to drive to work, or they don't have to drive as much, or go to as many places as they have been going, and the virus may prevent us from doing some of that anyhow. And that might provide a bigger opening for alternative energy to come along. And we're seeing Teslas, and I saw a new one today, the Ionic, when I was walking my dog. There's capacity to build and deploy electric vehicles and other kinds of things. I think, and I've written about this before, I think the oil industry may be about to go into decline. There certainly isn't enough petroleum in the ground to fuel us for the next century. We're going to have to come up with something else. The industry appears to be tearing itself apart right now.
I wondered if this is me now exposing myself as a narrow-minded individualist who only cares about himself, but I did think yesterday, is this a buying opportunity?
You're not the only one.
Well, it is, except that you've got no place to take delivery.
Yeah, because now if you buy an oil option, you actually have to get it. You can stick it in your pool, those of you who have pools.
So we need Instacart for oil, is what you're saying?
I thought it was interesting. Didn't the number go up like by $38 a barrel today
minus 14, it went to plus 1 point something.
The futures, it's up around 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, which means that
Hence,
that's the real price.
if you could buy for minus something and sell for 30, you'd be doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Except you'd be competing with Saudi Arabia to try to get rid of it.
Yeah, but see, Trump has already diverted all that cash that he's stolen to the wall, so he doesn't have any more funds.
Yeah. Well, how about
We
that?
don't have a wall either.
Yeah. There you go.
I was going to
Go
say,
ahead.
long-term thing, and this is preoccupying me personally, so don't feel the need to talk about it, but I have become obsessed with the practicalities of doing universal basic income, actually delivering it through software and tokens to the world. And it feels to me as if the inability of the government to distribute $1,200 to people shows a massive need for digital currency and wallets and the ability to spend from those wallets that is trivial from a software point of view, but doesn't exist. So it feels like the universal basic income moment.
Yeah, but trying to get the entire country to.
Well, that's a good point. But, you know, there was an article in the Post or the Times this morning that made the comparison that the Canadians were able to drop $2,000 in people's bank accounts overnight. So it's not a universal problem. It's a United States problem.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't
There's
that
a lot of
because
that.
The software engineering is trivial compared to the social engineering.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest. So I hesitate to answer because then I'm going to go down a rat hole of explaining it, which Steve probably doesn't want me to do, so I won't.
Wow, but I didn't.
You're just going to leave us dangling?
No, I mean, you know, universal. What is it called?
UBI, Universal Basic Income.
Yeah. Isn't that what Yang ran on?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how many of the radical ideas that surfaced during the Democratic run for the nomination now seem eminently practical and desirable. Things like universal health care, universal basic income, which were, you know, fringe and nutty things just 4 months ago. People are saying, well, why don't we have that now? How can we get it?
You know, that brings up the voting by mail conundrum. Anybody want to talk about that?
Yeah. Why don't they? Why doesn't?
forever? I mean, isn't like
Why don't we
30%
do
of the
it?
population always do that? Why? I don't get the big deal. So.
Well, you know, if the government doesn't support this United States Postal Service, that's going to be a real problem for that.
Well, to me, that's the weakness of vote by mail is the U.S. Postal Service. I'd rather have it, you know, UPS or FedEx do it.
So,
Yeah, unless Amazon buys the Postal Service.
Well, I'm good with
I don't
that.
think Trump will ever let that happen. He'd rather see it die on the vine than Amazon to do that.
You mean the Washington Post, Amazon?
The Whamazon.
The corrupt Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, Amazon.
Yeah, you got to throw it all out there.
Yeah, it's all got to be there. You're right. But I live in one of 4 states.
I live in one of 4 states where vote by mail is universal. There is no in-person voting. Everybody gets mailed a ballot. Everybody gets mailed a booklet with the ballot, and you have a 2 or 3 week window to send it back, and that's it. Now it's interesting. There is a way to route around the mail because they do put drop boxes in front of the city halls and many of the libraries. So if you'd like to drive your ballot into a collection point, you can do that. But there is no, you know, old style voting location where people are greeted by old volunteers and line up at booths and mark their ballots. You bring your ballot in completely marked. And one of the conveniences that you have as much time as you need to research anything that's on the ballot, either through printed material or online material. And you don't feel any social pressure to get out of the voting booth so the next person can come in. You take your time, fill out your ballot, and either mail or carry it in.
That's the big issue. They don't want, when I say they, some people don't want it so convenient that everybody can vote, because if everybody can vote, that might not be good for some folks who'd rather limit the amount of votes that are able to get counted.
Clearly, I mean, Trump has a great predilection for saying the quiet part out loud, and he said it explicitly. If everybody votes, Republicans won't win. I mean, he just said it. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
But
Give him credit for that.
that used to be the dog whistle. It used to be the subtext. He just puts it right out there where everyone can hear it.
that I agree with that.
Yeah.
But those of us who lived through the time when we were all activists, which I think almost all of us did, you know, we would do things like, for example, there's a great software thing called Bright ID. Bright ID is it uses blockchain, and it's a guarantee of unique identity without saying who you are. So every human being can only have one of these. There's no way to get two. So it's a way of stopping double counting. And you know, if we built an app that said on the same days of the election, install this app and vote, we could have, assuming everyone did it, we could have results within seconds from everywhere in the country and know what the result was. And so the mail system is kind of like one way of doing it, but technology is even better than the mail system. And by the way, these Bright ID things, you could put voting booths anywhere you want, like in the newsagent or the liquor store, probably a bad idea, so where people could, if they didn't have a smartphone and couldn't install the app, they could still go and register their vote. So I think we're kind of responsible for how fucked up things are, because we're not even ourselves leveraging the tools to put these people to shame.
Hasn't Estonia done something not dissimilar to that, where everyone that lives in Estonia has an electronic ID attached to them, and things are done through the use of that electronic ID, kind of making Estonia maybe the most technologically forward-thinking place on the planet?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, the problem with those kinds of outcomes is what happens when the you know, the other guys take advantage of it.
It's fine. I mean, you want a level playing field.
What's fine? I mean, you know, how many do you really want to have who you voted for be publicly available?
No, it wouldn't be. They don't even know who you are. They just know that you're a unique individual and you didn't get counted twice.
Oh, you mean that this internet thing is completely safe?
Well, it can be. It depends on the quality of the software, right?
Well, the thing that I heard when you guys were talking a little bit earlier, it reminds me of how I voted, how Tina and I voted this time, because this was the beginning of the pandemic, but we were already pretty nervous at that point. And so I didn't want to go and vote. And it was too late to vote by mail because it was the day of the election. And what we ended up doing was we just dropped the ballot off. So I think that the innovation for this period of time is contactless voting. It's not by mail. It's just, if, you know, you take the thing out and you toss it to them and they give you a thumbs up after seeing your name on the list, and you're done.
I agree. Hey, I'm all in for contactless. I just did a contactless pickup at was it Chipotle? I mean, when you start doing contactless, you start wondering, why do we not just keep doing more contactless for certain kind of things?
All right, so Michael, why is that a bad idea, what I just said?
It's not a bad idea. You know, I just if you control how you mail out ballots, you don't even have to check people off on the list. I mean, your identity is part of the ballot that you turn in.
Dennis?
What he said, I don't have a problem with that.
So you don't think that you don't think there's a downside?
Well,
think-
look, there is a social ritual to making a pilgrimage to a voting place, and there is some value to that. And when we went to the original vote by mail here in Washington, I said, "Oh, I'm going to miss that terribly," but then I didn't. You know, my substitute was to wait till election day, not to mail it in advance, to wait till election day, and then drive to City Hall and drop it off in the box. So I felt some ritual, emotional connection to the old ways, but you know, lately I've just been mailing it in. It's easy.
I felt no ritual to the old ways. I hated being in a line with a bunch of people. In Georgia, I mean, I'm sure in other states it's happened as well, but there are some places that, you know, you were in line for 5 hours. My mom and dad, they sent in their absentee ballot, 2 minutes and they're done. I'd rather have that model than the ritual of standing in a line in Georgia.
I've never lived in a place where I was subjected to that kind of voter restriction, where there are so few voting places available compared to the people who want to vote, that you're stuck in a line for hours. So I recognize that, and it's something that I've just never lived through. I've always been able to just walk
I'm
up
glad
and
you
pretty
haven't.
much walk in.
It's not fun.
Yeah, think about Wisconsin though. Interesting, what happened there. You know, they took 100 and some polling stations and put it down to 5, forced people to go out and do it while the mayor sat there in a hazmat suit and said everybody was going to be safe. And then they all voted, and in the end voted the Republican judge out. So I thought that one backfired, didn't it?
Yep.
That was a good case.
So I'm in
Yeah.
favor of the voting them out part. But you know, what about the canceling the election part?
Who's talking about that?
Trump.
Trump and many paranoid people.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, he
I
actually
haven't
said
heard-
that?
I've heard paranoid people, but
that.
not Trump.
I used to reject that whole idea that, you know, Trump's going to get a third term. All that stuff is nonsense. But effectively, if they stop the election, then they can't frog march him out of the White House.
Well, yes, they can, because his term is over. His term ends on January 20th, whether he's been reelected or not reelected. Especially if he's not been reelected, then you have to go to the presidential line of succession.
Or they pass a law to extend.
No,
passes
a
that
law
law?
won't do it. You have to amend the Constitution. A simple law won't do it. And the presidential line of succession is problematical too, because everybody in the line of succession is usually an appointee. It's like the Secretary of State or whatever, or the Speaker of the House, and they've all been elected to the same basic terms. Nancy Pelosi is third in line.
Yeah, people are saying that, well, it's going to be Nancy Pelosi, but her term ends as well. So
Exactly. Right. So what happens is like I was talking about before, this is another one of those boundaries that Trump has crossed. We've never had this issue before because everybody played by the rules. Now with no, if what Steve says comes to pass, then we have no rules and no backup for how this works.
Hasn't the Constitution already been trampled?
Quite a bit.
pieces of it, of course, yes.
Yeah, but you know, for most people, and I'm not talking about people on this call or Democrats for that matter, for most people, you know, trampling the Constitution is an abstract concept. It doesn't really mean much.
Yeah.
Unless it's the Second Amendment, then, you know, all bets are off.
Oh, yeah. Let's liberate Virginia.
I think I'd be more concerned with how ineffective Biden is being during this time than I am with anything untoward happening.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's why we need the fairness doctrine.
Is Biden ineffective, or is he playing rope-a-dope?
It's hard.
I hope he is.
It's hard to know the difference because if it is rope-a-dope, it's ineffective.
Well,
Oh, no,
growing
I
up
don't
in
know.
I
Delaware,
don't agree with that. I mean, you just said before, somebody, maybe Frank, was pointing out that in Wisconsin, when the smoke cleared, guess what?
It backfired, exactly.
Yeah. So,
And if you look
so
at Trump's numbers right now, his numbers have been declining for a couple of weeks. What Trump is doing is not working. And in his best day, he has not commanded a majority of the opinion, the public opinion.
let's talk about Zoom for a few minutes.
Okay.
that was an abrupt change in direction there.
Yeah.
Well,
Put on the brakes, make a left.
they do call it the Gillmor gang for a reason. But seriously, there is a connection. I just haven't revealed it yet, or thought of it.
Oh, so I guess you're not going to.
So he's going to leave it to everybody else to figure that one out.
No. Hey, you know what? Let's gang up on him. What do you mean by that, Steve?
What would Frank used to be like the czar of entertainment programming at CNN. What would you do with a host or some minor cog in the wheel like me? What do you just cut them off?
Oh, absolutely. Dina, you can do that now. go ahead. No, seriously.
All right. So here's one thought. What Zoom represents to me is the next version of the web.
Web or the internet?
Well, until there was a web, who cared about the internet? Not me.
The information superhighway.
The ability
Elaborate.
to, I mean, blogs, websites, who cares? Zoom, everybody cares.
Yeah, it's funny that even people who have been slapped around about the security issues of Zoom have totally ignored it. And its stock has continued to go up.
The company is like what, 35 billion or something like that now.
Wow.
So
what was it before all this happened?
I don't know, 5, 2.
It's gone up a lot.
If you do it as a multiple of revenue, it's trading at like 400 times revenue, which is
Right.
sustainable.
Yeah, but I mean, what it represents is, looking at the market numbers right now is an exercise in fantasy. But what it does represent is that people, they're concerned about their privacy and security, but they're not as concerned about that as, their ability to keep in touch with their friends and family and survive this thing.
That's why everybody's still on Facebook.
But the question is, what does Zoom substitute for? I don't think it substitutes for the web. I think Zoom substitutes for phone calls. Zoom substitutes for in-person meetings. It's not the replacement of the web. There are different kinds of communications, some of which are very involving and engaging, and some of which are more casual, where people will keep multiple windows open, or the very light communication of a Twitter stream, which is just a sentence or two at a time, and you're on to the next one. When you get involved in a Zoom call, you're pretty much preoccupied for as long as it takes. So it's a different kind of thing. It's not the new web or the new if anything, it's the new television or the new going out to meetings.
I don't think people have figured out all the things that you can do with Zoom or will in the future. I don't completely disagree with you, Michael, but I do think that, for example, remember that when the internet started and you would be sitting across from somebody in the same room, and instead of talking to them, you'd send them a text or you'd send them an email. Or, I don't know about you, but
right.
That's what we did at NBC. And but there was still people in the room. I actually can envision a time when this window with the 6 of us is sitting over on my second monitor while I'm doing stuff on my other monitor, and you all are doing your thing. and I'll turn over and look over at my other monitor and say, so Brent, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? And now it's become a different kind of there's a different texture to it.
Another data
texting-
point about this. Let me just toss another data point in to reinforce what Frank just said. Facebook portal. Does anybody know what that is?
Yeah, I've been thinking about getting it.
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
So briefly, what it is FaceTime in a box.
On your TV, if you know.
Whatever. And if you've got Wi-Fi and you've got a persistent connection, you can nail it up between two locations or more. But the two location point is the data point is it's sold out.
Really? After like a
Yeah.
couple of years of sitting around doing nothing?
Can't get them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because it speaks to the same thing that you're talking about, Frank, which is this ability to basically take your social media environment and add video and not only replace your personal life, but also a significant portion of your professional life, which is why this thing is so, built out and why Microsoft is trying to co-opt it with Teams. And, the growth of all these communications packages is a testament to the underlying hunger for us to be able to, when we don't believe the president and we don't believe that the Congress can do anything, what do we believe? Something about this, I think, is, an extension, maybe instead of the web, Michael, it's an extension of social media.
I would add that there is some level of what you're talking about, Steve, in the voice category. So in the Amazon Alexas and the Google Home devices with video. So an Amazon show, which is either a 5-inch screen or I think a 10-inch screen.
I got the 7-inch screen, I think.
Really a cool device, and I think that there's a lot to be said about what's going on in the voice world right now, and can combine the voice world to what it is we're talking about. I mean, there are people who are saying that the voice world is the new internet as well. So I mean, it's an interesting thing that we're going through right now in communication, and it certainly changed, for example, all of live television production. It doesn't exist anymore. It exists like this.
No, it looks like the Gillmor gang, for God's sake.
Yeah.
With all the latency and out of sync visuals and
that will not last very long, because there's an awful lot of people out there who are using television cameras and green screens and then putting great looking backgrounds. And look at these 6 of us here. You got to say, Keith's got the shot. Brent, yours is pretty good too. But imagine with better cameras and better lighting and better audio, which is what's happening out there. Then combine that with, look, a lot of people are also still using WebEx. Cisco is a big deal on MSNBC, I think, or is it CNN? One of the two of them is doing primarily all of their stuff using Cisco, and I think one of them, it's either MSNBC or CNN, is still using some measure of Skype and Zoom. But as things get better and as all of this stuff starts happening, the whole world of television production has completely changed. We talked about this last week when we talked about what the heck are the broadcast unions going to do with this world. This world.
It was like
whenever
a month
that
ago,
was.
but go ahead.
Was it a month ago?
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know. I
Exactly.
honestly, yesterday feels like a month ago. But anyway, I think that the whole world of communications, and maybe a lot of it has to do with what's going on with the coronavirus issue, has changed and will forever be changed.
Frank, I think that if you ask the question, how has the internet evolved over the past, I would go back to 2007 since the iPhone. If you ask how the internet's evolved as we move first to apps and then to, let's say, any to any, where think of me as a node and Steve as a node and Brent as a node. We're all nodes. And a web page is another node, and a podcast is another node, and a newsletter is another node. What's really happened is that we're increasingly close to a world in which anything is available to anybody always. And it's now about what you choose to mix together. We're at that moment where the quality of what you can mix together from all sources, I'm not going to do it because Steve will shoot me virtually, but if I wanted to share a web page now, I could. If I wanted to play the Rolling Stones song from Lady Gaga's show the other night on the show, I could.
No, you couldn't, because that would be a copyright violation, and it would.
Only if it was.
And if you were right, also, if this was being shown on Facebook Live, they have algorithms that would stop the audio. Oh, that was you, Brent.
Yeah, I kind of know that one by heart. But
Yeah.
there are a couple things though. I've been a DJ for a long time, and I just started doing it again, and that kind of brings us back to, I think what we're seeing with Zoom and these other things is, interactive engagement between creators and so-called fans, and as those two worlds get together and become more collaborative, that gives the fans the kind of the opportunity to become creators themselves. I mean, I just saw a stat where I think video game sales this is the highest they've been in 12 years, and Twitch is going crazy with Amazon. So people that started out liking to watch gamers game now are trying to be those guys themselves. And then what's going on with the DJs? They can't go out into the clubs and do their thing. So now there are Instagram DJs all over the place, and some of these folks are getting upwards of 100,000 people watching their streams. And so they're able to see, the kind of how their fans are reacting almost the same way as if they were in a club, but there's more engagement, there's more ability to kind of track this stuff. And I think that's kind of driving this, as well as, just people doing what we're doing. I mean, it's like they want to collaborate to the point where they want to be like the guys they're watching at some point.
I think
one more example of the endless fragmenting of the mass audience. That when we lost the 3 television networks and the 3 mass circulation magazines, and now we're going to cable networks and YouTube and Zoom, and everyone being a node that's both an audience and a broadcaster. How do we have a sense of what the general is?
Do we need to have a sense of what the general is? I mean, look, you mentioned Twitch. CBS just bought a company that does what Twitch does, and they're getting into that gaming two-way stream as well. I also think that the issue that Steve brought up about the copyright infringement, that's going to be re-examined. BMI and ASCAP and all of that, they're going to have to look at this and say, we need to co-opt this. We can't shut it down. That's what happened with Napster. When the music industry tried to shut Napster down as opposed to jumping on its back and creating something new, I think that part of what's going on here is going to not only be what's happening in our world and the change in our world, but it will change other things that will be associated to it. And as Michael, as you just said, we did go from being, watching television to becoming our own journalists to now being our own broadcasters. So that's just a natural, I think, progression of the way the technology and the society is coming together.
Yeah, I think that the idea of becoming our own broadcasters, I think that's attractive, but I think it's a little bit, it misses the point, which is if you don't have a connection to a group or an audience or the issue of shelf space on the internet, it's just wide open. So yeah, sure, we can all do this, but the question is what do we do with it?
Well,
the audience will.
Some people are adept at audience building and community building. They have that in mind in their intention as they put stuff out, and they scoop people up. through various mechanisms. So I mean,
You know, Frank had a good point, I thought, when he said, "Do we really need a general audience?" And I don't know the answer to it, but I think that people who are good at scooping up for a general audience may have less to do with what's happening right now and about to happen, you know, permanently, which is, you know, I mean, we've talked about this in the past. Dennis, what's your thought about this issue? Do you see any connection with previous media generations, other than, I know you love TV so much that you're captivated by this conversation, but can you give us some context?
Well, I don't know if I can give you some context, but it strikes me that it would be helpful to look through the other end of the telescope. I think what's happening more than what technologies we use is that we're defining a new commons. And the commons is what's going to generate the general audience. It's going to regenerate the general audience. And the way things are evolving, the way things are set up, everything is opt-in. I'm not a broadcaster. You are. But I can take advantage of some things like this if it strikes my interest, or not. I can go off and do something else. What we've got now is this great big wormhole that is increasingly becoming the way we interact. And I think if you look at what's happened with the virus, it's pushing us into this commons and is pushing us to flesh out this commons.
I think we were going in this direction already anyway. I mean, if you think about it, from broadcast television, which then went down the funnel, then became cable television, because you could be niche-y and give somebody the Real Housewives of Atlanta if you wanted to, and they didn't have to watch some you know, a Seinfeld episode on NBC. And then it goes down even further into streaming, which has become, you know, I don't know about you, but I can't think of a single night during the last 4 weeks that I haven't stayed up really late, but binging on something. Most recently, Bosch, which is just the
That was
best.
actually good. That was great.
Absolute.
No spoilers. No.
And I'm not gonna spoil it, but it is the absolute best cop show on television or on the stream right now. So we've come from broadcast to cable to the stream to now our own personalized broadcast networks. I think we've been headed in that direction, and the virus just pushed it over the top.
By the way,
Exactly.
that's not only true. Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
That was Dennis agreeing.
I was just violently agreeing.
So
You know, even if you unwind this whole thing past internet, past broadcast, past mass media like movies, in the 19th century, there was somehow communication that put a piano in the parlor and sold Stephen Foster sheet music all over the country.
Susanna.
There was a common culture, even when we didn't have a common means of dispersing it. When all we had was the telegraph and things carried on horses.
Hey, we had smoke signals. We had smoke signals before that.
Right, but as Neil Postman points out, the content of what you can convey in a smoke signal is probably not quite that rich. I don't know if anyone's written a sonnet in a smoke signal.
What we're describing is the increasing power of the individual and their network when looked at from the point of view of anybody that wants to disseminate anything. So if you look at advertising right now, it's going internet advertising. It's all focused on influencers. And what is an influencer? It's a person with followers. And you know, if you've got a great podcast, you can make quite a decent bit of money from sponsorships if you are an influencer, if you've got followers. So you've got the power of the individual using the tools with their network. And now you look at that from Procter & Gamble's point of view. They have to have a completely different way of disseminating marketing messages about their products. than they had before. So it's audiences, plural, replace audience, singular. And I think that is locked in and loaded now. Is what my interpretation of what Steve said about this it replaces the internet. Well, it definitely replaces singular portals like yahoo.com, which began to erode around 1999. And it even undermines centralized cloud services because we're getting decentralization and power at the edge.
You know, the idea that that what we're doing is sort of media in the time of coronavirus. So, but there's an entirely different conversation to be had about advertising in the time of coronavirus. It has changed completely, and I can tell you, as somebody who buys advertising, that going out and trying to buy advertising right now, it's a buyer's market. It has never been a buyer's market before.
Well, there's something else that's going on in the coronavirus. You know, when you mentioned Procter and Gamble, one of their all packaged goods, one of their big merchandising platforms is the supermarket aisle and the package design, and that's disappeared. You know, you used to be able to introduce new products on an end cap in a supermarket. Now that's gone. You haven't just lost broadcast television; you've also lost the supermarket.
Well, and you certainly lost outside advertising is gone. I mean, you know, if you're not driving down the street or walking through Times Square or being in Piccadilly, owning that 350-foot screen with a message on it doesn't matter.
There's a lot of data that it's not gone. It's in hibernation. Number one. Number two, the subscription model is taking up a lot of the slack. And then there's, you know, what we're all doing right now, I think, which is gathering audiences for when it comes back. So, you know, one of the nice things about the virus is that we're going to have plenty of time to talk about this.
Tell us about the nice things about the virus, Uncle Steve. What are the nice things?
That's the headline, Steve, right there. One of the nice things about the virus.
No, the headline is whatever Tina decides it is. Okay, just quickly around the table and starting with Keith because he has to jump. Just last thoughts, and I don't mean that in any significant way.
Pro tip: this behind me is an iPhone video. So anywhere that you want to put in your backdrop, just go and take an iPhone video in good light of whatever it is.
Yeah, if you spent $50,000 on a Mac Pro.
No, just an iPhone. It's just an iPhone video. Nothing.
No, but it only works because you've got like 25 cores.
Oh, no. Number two, I've got a normal Logitech camera, but I'm facing the light. You've got to have a light facing at your face. That's the two things. iPhone video behind, light facing at your face.
Yep.
Okay, that's your comment?
I thought that.
Okay. Who wants to go next? Brent, you're laughing. You win.
Yeah. Okay. Next time I know not to laugh when I'm on Gillmor again here.
Never sit in the front row of a comedy club.
Yeah, there it is. Rules to live by. All right. So completely off topic. I am just so glad that ESPN moved up the release of The Last Dance, the 10-hour 30 for 30 documentary on Michael Jordan and the Bulls. It started Sunday. I wish they would just let us binge the whole 10 hours, but they're going to drip it out. But it's got everybody talking. It's like something that happened 22 years ago in sports has absolutely everybody talking because there's nothing else to watch that's brand new. So I'm all for it.
Michael Markman.
I'll see you next time.
Frank Radice.
Watch Bosch.
I agree.
You know, Tina and I have this argument about Bosch. I love it. Tina's like, eh.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm telling you that the guy who plays Bosch is also the guy who does the voice on the Audible versions of all the books that were written by the guy who wrote Bosch. And it's
Didn't know that.
really interesting to listen to the books and then watch the show and see how they've molded and put those episodes, the books together. And it's fascinating, and
No
it's
spoiler.
great to hear. It's great to hear him narrating those books. But it's fascinating and it's great stuff.
Who-
He's cute though.
Who is Titus Welliver? Is that who?
That's
Titus
his real
Welliver.
name, yeah.
Yeah, Titus Welliver, and he's just the perfect Bosch. And I started reading the books before I saw the TV show, and he is Bosch. It's
Wow.
doesn't usually happen like that.
Okay, Denis Pombriant.
Well, I hope you guys are happy. You've succeeded in slowly corrupting me. I've now made notes to watch Bosch and The Last Dance. And, I'm going to have to wrestle with my wife to get the TV away from her. And it's all your fault. And
TVs, Dennis.
Flame is
Yeah,
the
or
name
you-
of the game.
I have
Use
more
your-
than one. I have more than one.
Use your phone.
Yeah.
You can hide. You can hide under your pillow and watch it on your phone. That's what I do.
That's another note. Seriously.
Okay,
Seriously, the serious point I would make is that the Dow is down 600 points today because the oil markets are still in free fall. And we are, I disagreed, or I didn't believe that we were embarking on finding the new normal. But over the last week, things have deteriorated or at least changed so significantly that now we can start talking about everything we've talked about today, like the new commons, how we're getting along in the new reality, and we're just a month into this thing. It's amazing.
It's a year.
oh,
And we were so cheery until that last part, Dennis.
well, no, we've survived my
Bosch?
best of the virus list.
The Last Dance.
There was a
Yeah,
Larry
it's
Bird
great.
sighting in The Last Dance, by the way.
Oh, I have
Okay,
to watch it.
I wanted.
What about Bill Belichick?
Just one quick tip for if you get CBS All Access and you care about Star Trek, nice. But the Good Fight is a wonderful show,
I second that.
mostly because it's just so insanely anti-Trump that they go into like fantasy episodes about it where, yeah, did you write it down? Okay.
I wrote it down.
Hey, you got to pay money for it, but it's worth it.
Well, you
Hey,
can get a month for free, and you can probably get in most of the episodes in that month, and then decide you don't want to pay money.
Oh
Yeah, but
man, you
you're
can do
working-
that. You can do that with all of the services.
Right.
Take-
And then you have to choose between that and having a job.
No, I got time. I got time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hulu subscription.
Did I get everybody? Did they all say what?
Can Tina give us something?
Well, Tina is about to be thanked by me. Tina, turn your camera on. Just click the little icon lower left.
It's not that. It's just that. Do I want to do that?
Yes.
Oh man.
Okay, there you go. Thanks to our producer and director, Tina Chase
Okay.
Gillmor.
Thank you.
Yay.
New wave.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time, if there is a next time.
Bye. Stay healthy.